Then they seemed all to be glad, but the water stood in their eyes. Yet they looked one upon another, and also bowed before the interpreter. He had them then into another room, where was a hen and chickens, and bid them observe a while. So one of the chickens went to the trough to drink, and every time she drank, she lifted up her head and her eyes toward heaven. See, said he, what this little chick doth, and learn of her to acknowledge whence your mercies come, by receiving them with looking up. Yet again, said he, observe the look. So they gave heed, and perceived that the hen did walk in a fourfold method towards her chickens. One, she had a common call, and that she hath all day long. Two, she had a special call, and that she had but sometimes. Three, she had a brooding note, and four, she had an outcry. Matthew 27. Interpreter. Now, said he, compare this hen to your king, and these chickens to his obedient ones. For, answerable to her, himself has his methods, which he walketh in towards his people. By his common call he gives nothing. By his special call he always has something to give. He has also a brooding voice for them that are under his wing, and he has an outcry to give the alarm when he seeth the enemy. I choose, my darlings, to lead you into the room where such things are, because you are women, and they are easy for you. Christiana. And sir, said Christiana, pray let us see some more. So he had put them in a slaughterhouse, where was a butcher, a killing of a sheep. And behold, the sheep was quiet, and took her death penalty. Then said the interpreter, you must learn of this sheep to suffer, and to put up with wrongs without murmurings and complaints. Behold how quietly she takes her death, and without objecting she suffereth her skin to be pulled over her ears. Your king doth call you his sheep. After this he led them into his garden, where was great variety of flowers. And he said, do you see all these? So Christiana said, yes. Then said he again, behold the flowers, and diverse in stature, in quality and color, and smell and virtue. And some are better than some. Also where the gardener had set them, there they stand, and quarrel not with one another. Again he had them into his field, which he had sown with wheat and corn. But when they beheld the top of all were cut off, only the straw remained. He said again, this ground was dunged, and plowed, and sowed, but what shall we do with the crop? Then said Christiana, burn some, and make muck of the rest. Then said the interpreter again, fruit, you see, is that thing you look for, and for want of that you condemn it to the fire, and to be trodden under feet of men. Beware that in this you condemn not yourselves. Then as they were coming in from abroad, they espied a robin, with a great spider in his mouth. So the interpreter said, look here. So they looked, and mercy, and wondered. But Christiana said, what a disparagement it is to such a little pretty bird as the robin redbreast is, he being also a bird above many that loveth to maintain a kind of social comfortableness with men. I had thought they had lived under crumbs of bread, or upon other such harmless matter. I like him worse than I did. The interpreter then replied, "This robin is an emblem, very apt to set forth some professors by. For to sight they are, as this robin, pretty of note, color, and carriage. They seem also to have a very great love for professors that are sincere, and above all other to desire to associate with them, and to be in their company, as if they could live upon the good man's crumbs. They pretend also that therefore it is that they frequent the house of the godly, and the appointments of the Lord. But when they are by themselves, as the robin, they can catch and gobble up spiders. They can change their diet, drink and swallow down sin like water." So when they were come again into the house, because supper as yet was not ready, Christiana again desired that the interpreter would either show or tell of some other things that are profitable. Then the interpreter began and said, "The fatter the sow is, the more she desires the mire. The fatter the ox is, the more gamesomely he goes to the slaughter. And the more healthy the lusty man is, the more prone he is unto evil. There is a desire in woman to go neat and fine, and it is a comely thing to be adorned with that in God's sight is of great price. It is easier watching a night or two than to sit up a whole year together. So it is easier for one to begin to profess well than to hold out as he should to the end. Every shipmaster, when in a storm, will willingly cast that over the board that is of the smallest value in the vessel. But who will throw the best out first? None but he that feareth not God. One leak will sink a ship, and one sin will destroy a sinner. He that forgets his friend is ungrateful unto him, but he that forgets his Savior is unmerciful to himself. He that lives in sin and looks for happiness hereafter is like him that soweth cockle and thinks to fill his barns with wheat or barley. If a man would live well, let him fetch his last day to him and make it always his company keeper. Whispering and change of thoughts prove that sin is in the world. If the world which God sets light by is counted a thing of that worth with men, what is heaven that God commendeth? If the life that is attended with so many troubles is so loath to be let go by us, what is the life above? Every body will cry up the goodness of men. But who is there that is, as he should be, affected with the goodness of God? We seldom sit down to meat, but we eat and leave. So there is in Jesus Christ more merit and righteousness than the whole world has need of." When the interpreter had done, he takes them out into his garden again, and had them to a tree, whose inside was all rotten and gone, and yet it grew and had leaves. Then said Mercy, "What means this?" "This tree," said he, "whose outside is fair, and whose inside is rotten, it is to which many may be compared that are in the garden of God, who with their mouths speak high in behalf of God, but indeed will do nothing for him, whose leaves are fair, but their heart good for nothing but to be tinder for the devil's tinderbox." Now supper was ready. the table spread, and all things set on board. So they sat down and did eat, when one had given thanks. And the interpreter did usually entertain those that lodged with him with music and meals. So the minstrels played. There was also one that did sing, and a very fine voice he had. His song was this: The Lord is only my support, and he that doth me feed. How can I then want anything whereof I stand in need? When the song and music was ended, the interpreter asked Christiana what it was that at first did move her thus to betake herself to a pilgrim's life. Christiana answered, First, the loss of my husband came to my mind, at which I was heartily grieved. But all that was natural affection. Then, after that came the troubles and pilgrimage of my husband into my mind, and also how like a churl I had carried it to him as to that. So guilt took hold of my mind, and would have drawn me into the pond, but that opportunely I had a dream of the well-being of my husband, and a letter sent by the king of that country where my husband dwells to come to him. The dream and the letter together so wrought upon my mind that they forced me to this way. Interpreter: But met you with no opposition before you set out of doors? Christiana: Yes. A neighbor of mine, one Miss Timorous, she was akin to him that would have persuaded my husband to go back for fear of the lions. She also so befooled me for, as she called it, my intended desperate adventure. She also urged what she could do to dishearten me from it. The hardship and troubles that my husband met with in the way, but all this I got over pretty well. But a dream that I had of two ill-looked ones, that I thought did plot how to make me miscarry in my journey, that hath troubled me. Yea, it still runs in my mind, and makes me afraid of every one that I meet, lest they should meet me to do me a mischief, and turn me out of my way. Yea, I may tell my lord, though I would not everybody know it, that between this and the gate by which we got into the way, we were both so sorely assaulted that we were made to cry out, Murder! And the two that made this assault upon us were like the two that I saw in my dream. Then said the interpreter, Thy beginning is good, thy latter end shall greatly increase. So he addressed himself to Mercy, and said unto her, And what moved thee to come hither, sweetheart? Mercy. Then Mercy blushed and trembled, and for a while continued silent. Interpreter. Then said he, Be not afraid, only believe and speak thy mind. Mercy. Then she began and said, Truly, sir, with my want of experience is that which makes me covet to be in silence, and that also that fills me with fears of coming short at last. I cannot tell of visions and dreams as my friend Christiana can, nor know I what it is to mourn for my refusing of the counsel of those that were good relations. Interpreter. What was it then, dear heart, that hath prevailed with thee to do as thou hast done? Mercy. Why, when our friend here was packing up to be gone from our town, I and another went accidentally to see her. So we knocked at the door and went in. When we were within, and seeing what she was doing, we asked her what was her meaning. She said she was sent for to go to her husband, and then she up and told us how she had seen him in a dream, dwelling in a curious place among immortals, wearing a crown, playing upon a harp, eating and drinking at his prince's table, and singing praises to him for bringing him thither, and so on. Now methought, while she was telling these things unto us, my heart burned within me. And I said in my heart, if this be true, I will leave my father and my mother, and the land of my nativity, and will, if I may, go along with Christiana. So I asked her father of the truth of these things. And if she would let me go with her, I saw now that there was no dwelling, but with the danger of ruin, any longer in our town. But yet I came away with a heavy heart, not for that I was unwilling to come away, but for that so many of my relations were left behind. And I come with all the desire of my heart, and will go, if I may, with Christiana unto her husband and his king. Interpreter. Thy setting out is good, for thou hast given credit to the truth. Thou art a Ruth, who did for the love she bare to Naomi, and to the Lord her God, leave father and mother, and the land of her nativity, to come out and go with a people that she knew not before. Ruth 2:11 and 12. The Lord recompense thy work, and full reward be given thee of the Lord God of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. Now supper was ended, and preparation was made for bed. The women were laid singly alone, and the boys by themselves. Now when Mercy was in bed, she could not sleep for joy, for that now her doubts of missing at last were removed farther from her than ever they were before. So she lay blessing and praising God, who had had such favor for her. In the morning they arose with the sun, and prepared themselves for their departure. But the interpreter would have them tarry a while. For, said he, you must orderly go from hence. Then said he to the damsel that at first opened unto them, take them and have them into the garden to the bath, and there wash them and make them clean from the soil which they have gathered by traveling. Then Innocent, the damsel, took them and had them into the garden, and brought them to the bath. So she told them that they must wash and be clean, for so her master would have the woman to do that called at his house as they were going on pilgrimage. Then they went in and washed, yea, they and the boys and all, and they came out of that bath, not only sweet and clean, but also much enlivened and strengthened in their joints. So when they came in, they looked fairer a deal than when they went out to a washing. When they were returned out of the garden from the bath, the interpreter took them and looked upon them, and said unto them, fair as the moon. Then he called for the seal whereof they used to be sealed, that were washed in his bath. So the seal was brought, and he set his mark upon them, that they might be known in the places whither they were yet to go. Now the seal was the contents and sum of the Passover, which the children of Israel did eat. Exodus 13:8, 9, and 10. When they came out of the land of Egypt, and the mark was set between their eyes, this seal greatly added to their beauty, for it was an ornament to their faces. It also added to their gravity, and made their countenance more like them of angels. Then said the interpreter again to the damsel that waited upon the woman, go into the vestry, and fetch out garments for these people. So she went and fetched out white raiment, and laid it down before him. So he commanded them to put it on. Is the fine linen white and clean? When the women were thus adorned, they seemed to be a terror one to the other, for that they could not see that glory, each one in herself, which they could see in each other. Now therefore they began to esteem each other better than themselves. For you are fairer than I am, said one, and you are more comely than I am, said another. The children also stood amazed to see into what fashion they were brought. The interpreter then called for a manservant of his, one great heart, and bid him take sword and helmet and shield, and take these my daughters, said he, conduct them to the house called Beautiful, at which place they will rest next. So he took his weapons and went before them, and the interpreter said, Godspeed. Those also that belonged to the family sent them away with many a good wish, so they went on their way and sang. This place has been our second stage. Here we have heard and seen those good things that from age to age to others hid have been. The dunghill raker, spider, hen, the chicken too to me, hath taught a lesson, let me then conform to it be. The butcher, garden, and the field, the robin and his bait, also the rotten tree doth yield me argument of weight, to move me for to watch and pray, to strive to be sincere, to take my cross up day by day, and serve the Lord with fear. Now I saw in my dream that those went on, and great heart before them. So they went and came to a place where Christian's burden fell off his back and tumbled. Tumbled into a sepulchre. Here then they made a pause. Here also they blessed God. Now, said Christiana, it comes to my mind what was said to us at the gate, to wit, that we should have pardon by word and deed, by word, that is, by the promise, by deed, to wit, in the way it was obtained. What the promise is, of that I know something, but what it is to have pardon by deed, or in the way that it was obtained, Mr. Greatheart, I suppose you know, which if you please, let us hear you discourse thereof. Greatheart. Pardon by the deed done is pardon obtained by some one for another that hath need thereof. Not by the person pardon, but in the way, saith another, in which I have obtained it. So then, to speak to the question more at large, the pardon that you in mercy and these boys have obtained by another, to wit, by him that let you in at that gate, and he hath obtained it in this double way. He has performed righteousness to cover you, and spilt blood to wash you in. Christiana. But if he parts with his righteousness to us, what will he have for himself? Greatheart. He has more righteousness than you have need of, or than he needeth himself. Christiana. Pray, make that appear. Christiana. Pray, make that appear. Greatheart. With all my heart, but first I must premise that he of whom we are now about to speak is one that has not his fellow. He has two natures in one person. Plain to be distinguished, impossible to be divided. Unto each of these natures a righteousness belongeth, and each righteousness is essential to that nature, so that one may as easily cause the nature to be extinct as to separate its justice or righteousness from it. Of these righteousnesses, therefore, we are not made partakers so as that they, or any of them, should be put upon us that we might be made just and live thereby. Beside these there is a righteousness which this person has, as these two natures are joined in one. And this is not the righteousness of the Godhead as distinguished from the manhood, nor the righteousness of the manhood as distinguished from the Godhead, but a righteousness which standeth in the union of both natures, and may properly be called the righteousness that is essential to his being prepared of God in the capacity of the mediatory office which he was to be entrusted with. If he parts with his first righteousness, he parts with his Godhead. If he parts with his second righteousness, he parts with the purity of his manhood. If he parts with his third, he parts with that perfection that capacitates him to the office of mediation. He has, therefore, another righteousness which standeth in performance or obedience to a revealed will. And that is that he puts upon sinners, and that by which their sins are covered. Wherefore saith, as by one man's disobedience many were made sinners, so by the obedience of one shall many be made righteous. Romans 5:19. Christiana, but are the other righteousness of no use to us? Greatheart. Yes, for though they are essential to his natures and offices, and cannot be communicated unto another, yet it is by virtue of them that the righteousness that justifies is for that purpose efficacious. The righteousness of his Godhead gives virtue to his obedience. The righteousness of his manhood giveth capability to his obedience to justify. And the righteousness that standeth in the union of these two natures to his office giveth authority to that righteousness to do the work for which it was ordained. So then, here is a righteousness that Christ, as God, has no need of, for he is God without it. Here is a righteousness that Christ, as man, has no need of to make him so, for he is a perfect man without it. Again, here is a righteousness that Christ, as God-man, has no need of, for he is perfectly so without it. Here then is a righteousness that Christ as God and as God-man has no need of with reference to himself, and therefore he can spare it, a justifying righteousness that he for himself wanteth not, and therefore giveth it away. Hence it is called the gift of righteousness. The righteousness since Christ Jesus the Lord has made himself under the law must be given away, for the law doth not only bind that is under it to do justly, but to use charity. Romans 5:17. Wherefore he must or ought by the law, if he hath 2 coats, to give one to him that hath none. Now our Lord indeed hath 2 coats, one for himself and one to spare. Wherefore he freely bestows one upon those that have none. And thus Christiana and Mercy, and the rest of you that are here, doth your pardon come by deed, or by the work of another man? Your Lord Christ is he that worked, and hath given away what he wrought for to the next poor beggar he meets. But again, In order to pardon by deed, there must something be paid to God as a price, as well as something prepared to cover us withal. Sin has delivered us up to the just course of righteous law. Now from this course we must be justified by way of redemption, a price being paid for the harms we have done. And this is by the blood of your Lord, who came and stood in your place instead, and died your death for your transgressions, thus as he ransomed you from your transgressions by blood, and covered your polluted and deformed souls with righteousness. Romans 8:34. For the sake of which God passeth by you, and will not hurt you when he comes to judge the world. Galatians 3 verse 13. Christiana, this is brave. Now I see that there was something to be learned by our being pardoned by word and deed. Good mercy, let us labor to keep this in mind. And my children, do you remember it also? But, sir, was not this it that made my good Christian's burden fall off his shoulder, and that made him give 3 leaps for joy? Greatheart, yes, it was the belief of this that cut those strings that could not be cut by other means, and it was to give him a proof of the virtue of this that he was suffered to carry his burden to the cross. Christiana, I thought so, for though my heart was lightsome and joyous before, yet is it 10 times more lightsome and joyous now, and I am persuaded by what I have felt, though I have felt but little as yet, that if the most burdened man in the world was here, and did see and believe as I now do, it would make his heart the more merry and blithe. Greatheart, there is not only comfort and the ease of a burden brought to us by the sight and consideration of these, but an endeared affection begotten us by it. But who can, if he doth but once think that pardon comes not only by promise, but thus, but be affected with the way and means of redemption, and so with the man that hath wrought it for him? Christiana, true. Methinks it makes my heart bleed to think that he should bleed for me. Oh, thou loving one, oh, thou blessed one, thou deservest to have me, thou hast bought me. Thou deservest to have me all, thou hast paid for me 10,000 times more than I am worth. No marvel that this made the water stand in my husband's eyes, and that it made him trudge so nimbly on. I am persuaded he wished me with him. But, vile wretch that I was, I let him come all alone. O mercy that thy father and mother were here, yea, and Miss Timorous also. Nay, I wish now with all my heart that here was Madame Wanton too. Surely their hearts would be affected, nor could the fear of the one, nor the powerful lust of the other, prevail with them to go home again, and refuse to become good pilgrims. Greatheart, you speak now in the warmth of your affections. Will it, think you, be always thus with you? Besides, this is not communicated to everyone, nor to everyone that did see your Jesus bleed. There were that stood by, and that saw the blood run from the heart to the ground, and yet were so far off this, that instead of lamenting, they laughed at him, and instead of becoming his disciples, did harden their hearts against him, so that all that you have, my daughters, you have by peculiar impression made by a divine contemplating upon what I have spoken to you. Remember that it was told you that the hen, by her common call, gives no meat to her chicken. This you have therefore by a special grace.